Um, Raise your hand. Who vacuums the living room? Oh, John, you vacuum the living room? Hey, class, John vacuums the living room. John, who else vacuums? And then I would say, oh, you vacuum the living room too. So-and-so vacuums the living room. Hey, let me put in the, let's combine them so I can get the ending of the verb in there. They, everybody, vacuum the living room. Next question. And so, or at the end, or after I ask 2 or 3 people, then I say, just a show of hands, raise your hand, who vacuums the living room? And this whole time I'm thinking, why am I doing this? You know, what are we talking about here except just to learn the grammar concepts or the, the vocab list for a given chapter. Anyways, you can create your own, but make it sure it's task-based, and we'll talk about that. Now, here's something when it comes to maybe task-based, because I'm still tapping into doing task-based activities and trying to understand it. Everyone's always hounding Bill Van Patten about explain more about task-based instruction. So it'd be something like, how about, you have one little topic and you have all the students talk with each other about as many people as they can within a 5-minute time of asking, do you do chores, simple, do you do chores in the house? Do you get paid for the chores? And then they just go ahead and ask all around, and then at that point, you can kind of start taking a survey of some sort when they come back to as a class. Raise your hand, raise your hand if you get paid. And then I start counting, and then I would say something like, raise your hand if you don't have to do anything in the house, get that information, and who does not get paid. So it's kind of like giving a little bit more purpose. We're talking about the context of whether you get paid for doing chores in your home, or if you're doing them. If you've got the expectation as a child to have to do chores in the house. So at that point, then you take a survey of the class. All right, class, here we go. And this is all in the target language, right? And we're saying, okay, class, this many people have to do chores in the house, and then you kind of chart it out, right? And then that's basically about it. Now the thing that comes later is that he's always talking about getting some sort of outside source. Now, as far as what we're talking about with chores and people getting paid, so maybe you'd have to find an article or something in your target language that's talking about this, or it's in English, and you look and you go ahead and transcribe, some sort of article, for the bigger picture. So if that kind of makes sense, that's kind of like what task-based lessons are. It's about taking like a certain topic and getting a whole bunch of information from the students in communication and seeing, does this microcosm, group of kids in the class after we read this article, do you think that's, is this a good reflection of how many people said, yes or no to all these questions match with this article in a bigger picture. I did one on I did a couple different, I did one on like sleeping, like how many hours do you sleep, what time do you go to bed, and I surveyed like all my students, the Spanish 1s and the Spanish 2s, and then the next day I gave them all like a little survey slip, and I took the numbers of how many said for each one, so that they can import, okay, I think 15 said 7 hours, I think 50 people said this, so they go ahead and do see what they think the results were. And so now I'm in the language again. This is for day 2 after they got all the information from themselves yesterday. So I say, okay, so the survey says out of 140 students, and then I'll say 37 sleep 6 hours, and they're like, looking to prepare to see if they, had that right. And then I'll say, okay, and the survey says out of 138 students, this many students slept for 8 hours. And so we've got some meaning involved, and it's all being used in the target language. And that's about it. And then I ended up, I've been trying to, I didn't have time to maybe transcribe something in Spanish to talk about adolescence and the importance of sleep and things like that. So kind of gives you an idea. But communication, yes, the expression and interpretation of meaning in a given context. And this is how context is defined in the setting and things like that. How we interact in a classroom is different from how we interact during dinner with friends. There's a lot of times where people might do some role playing for like a restaurant, and it's like, well, we're not in a restaurant, we're in a classroom. you know, and or we're not at a we're not at a store shopping. We're in a classroom. So basically, it brings up the question of should we be doing certain role playing things even too, as far as that goes, because the context is a classroom, not a restaurant or. Okay, so that takes care of a whole bunch of little things. I want to model like a lot of things that I do that you might want to take into your class. Oh, I forgot. Can I have a show of hands? I'm sorry. That your curriculum is a certain textbook. That you're following like a textbook. Okay, or maybe it's not the physical textbook, but I mean there's like vocab lists and themes for every single chapter and things like that. Why is somebody calling me? Okay.
Because you're awesome.
Forced output. Okay, so if we're focusing on the input with all of our lessons, I try to avoid forced output, which is anything more than 2-word response from your students. Okay, questions that elicit an open-ended response. What did you do yesterday? However, if you were doing like a vocab list and they've been having a lot of input on how to respond to that, then that's safe. Okay, and questions that do not elicit forced output. So what you want to focus on are yes or no questions, so they have something to say. When we do storytelling, is there a boy? No. Is there a girl? Yes. Is she 14? Yes. So, and I'm providing the input as they're just saying yes or no. Either or questions are very good. Is her name Olivia or Maria? They say Olivia. And then I say, is she 15? No. Is she 16? Yes. So I go back and forth, bouncing between yes and no and either or questions a little bit. And this will make sense when I do some stories. That's another question. I'm sorry, a lot of questions. Does anybody try to embed some sort of storytelling or story listening into their curriculum? Okay. Allow students to try on their own when they are ready. Okay. Who teaches level 1? Oh, great, because that's where I put all my energy, most of my energy. So a more effective approach to starting out the year, I feel, instead of doing a preliminary chapter, let's know numbers 1 through 100, and where you're from, how old you are, what's your name, even though I incorporate that stuff. But, obviously, how do we say A, B, C, D in the language, and showing a whole bunch of cognates, and the countries that speak Spanish, right, all this, the intro stuff. So I've went away from that because I really want to start with things that make the class interesting to them. That's based on their interests. Telling the time, that's in there too, right? Unless it comes into the school unit later on. What time do you have science? So I focus on expressing your name, where you live or from, and your age. I talk about the weather, which comes from Tina Hargaden, and the calendar, which comes from her as well. That's like my warm-up. This is something I newly implemented this year. I eventually give out warm-up sheets, but my warm-up would be talking about the weather. I bring up the weather of Metro Detroit, and we look at it, we talk about it. I have a calendar, I bring up the calendar, so they can start getting the numbers in sort of a meaningful way, and plus, you can start keeping yourself in the language since week 1, because it's quite simplistic to be able to talk about these things. So wow, he's already speaking Spanish the whole time. I'm understanding what he's talking about as far as the weather and the calendar and what day it is and what's the date and what's the day tomorrow and what day it was yesterday, and he's explaining that it's cloudy today and 47 degrees. And I have videos too that I've been recording this year that I model this stuff in my classroom. It's just me with a camera and going through calendar talk and weather, my interpretation of how Tina does it. Numbers 1 through 20, keep it short, or maybe 1 through 30, because that's how many days there are in the calendar, and everyone's 12 to 18 years old in your audience, or younger if you're an elementary teacher. And then I do mini stories. A lot of this I do starting in week 1, right off the get-go. The Super 7 high frequency words, mini stories. There's examples coming up. And I can give you a lot of files if you'd like to have them for your own. You can adjust them however you want. You contact me. Circling QA, question and answer. The special person, where every student is a special person who sits on a chair in the middle of the room, and I ask 12 questions. Anybody do special person or familiar with special person? Okay. So before I kind of do all this kind of stuff, I'm setting the rules, and this is from Tina Hargaden as well. New to me this year. It works to me, in my context, it works like a charm. And I'm going to, I don't want to deviate, I'm going to, when I pasted the picture of my rooms, the picture came up so big, and it wasn't shrinking. So here they are. This is what's in my room. Adapted from Tina. Listen with the intent to understand. Number 2, one person speaks and the others listen. Whether it's me or whoever I'm directing a question to and waiting for their response, and having the students either with their eyes, sitting up straight, tracking the speaker. If I'm saying something, looking at me, looking at the person I'm talking to. Supporting the flow of Spanish. No blurting in English, or keep it very minimal. Maybe if they're suggesting something, a one-word response in English to move a story along, or an invisible character we're creating in this space right here. We can talk about that a little bit, one-word image. Do your 50%, sit up, pay attention, respond, give interesting answers. Nothing on desks unless told otherwise, because 90% of the class is input and engage interpersonal communication in the language. They don't need to have anything in their hands. There's no notes taking, there's no phones out. There's nothing, okay? And if one of the sessions here is about the deskless classroom, which kind of gets, gets rid of that situation because there's no table to do anything else. Their hands are just on their in their laps, just like all of you. There's no desks there. I have desks, but I'll show you how I kind of have a little bit of both. Actors and artists, synchronize your actions with my words. So when I'm doing a story, I do all the TPR stuff too. I have them stand up and do brain breaks where I say draw in Spanish, they do this. I say write, they do this. Go shopping, they do this. Swimming, they're doing this. Comer, eating, they're doing this. Or habla. Right now they've got like 60 words they're all doing. I need a list to shout them all out at this point. And we could talk about that as well. So if I'm telling a story and I say he likes to eat hamburgers, everyone's sitting there and they're just doing this and doing this when I say it in unison. And he speaks Spanish. So when I say that again, they're kind of doing this. Or he says to his mother, they do this, he says. So now we got to go back to this. Okay. And I can send this out to everybody. I have it on a Google Drive too. I can share you this entire PowerPoint. Okay, then we talk about the Sweet 16 high frequency words. I give these to my students from the get-go. They are on a poster board to the left or right of my room, of the screen where I need to have presenting, so it's off screen. And they're always there, and it's the Spanish is the Spanish, and then it's defined in English. So whenever I want to use any of these, I don't even have to say what it means. I just come over. I can either do that because I have this, or I point. Okay. So there are I, and then two B's in a lot of your languages. Locational B and personal description. He's tall versus he's in the restaurant. Those are two different B's. The verb be. So for Spanish, it'd be I, es. It doesn't pick your order, but I just kind of I, es, tiene, has, está, le gusta. It's all in third person, by the way. Va, quiere. Oh, they do this for quiere. And then, so these are the main high ones, frequencies. These are the super 7. Then there's the super 16, which is ones that are often as well, and they're there. Okay, some characters leaving, somebody's doing something, que hace, a lot of the times what is he doing, except for doing exercises and doing homework. You're using does, but becomes, because the character becomes sad, becomes happy, becomes tired, se pone cansado. Can, he can do something, or he can't do something, or he can't find something. Puede, someone's giving something to somebody. Le da. And dice, so-and-so says, and I have a speech bubble of the person in the speech bubble. I said, la madre le dice, you have to clean your room. Saber, to know, not the to know for familiar, to be familiar with somebody. Hey, do you know my friend? Do you know how to do something? So if in your language you have two knows, that's sabe, informational. He knows how to play the guitar, sabe tocar la guitarra. And then someone sees something, so ve. So, again, this is not my room anymore. I switched into another room, so it looks nicer than this. But here they are. It's basically set up the same way. And I have all the question words going across the top and the meanings of those. So I'm always just pointing or laser beaming when I'm asking, the questions. In year one, most of the question word, I think the main question word is who, isn't it? Maybe quién, for the most part. I want to get why going on right off the bat as well, a little bit. Because sometimes that seems like that comes tail end later on, and I try to get it in a little sooner. And there it is, blown up. So my screen comes up here, and what we're doing today comes here, and rules are over there. Back to the rules again, just so because I'm noticing this. If you look at Tina Hargaden's videos on CI Liftoff, she keeps everything in the language, because you have to have this expectations. You have to have the students knowing what's expected in class. So what she does, and what I ended up started doing, is anytime there's something that breaks the flow of conversation, I immediately stop what I'm doing,